Hi Rick, it's James at Reedish Motorsport. We're doing the rear axle carrier panel check and report now. We're inside the car, starting with the internal sections first. We all know about the underneath on these, and we'll video that shortly when we put the car on the lift. But we've got the laptop open with the borescope camera so that we can get some live imaging inside the cavity. So there's a rear cavity which is underneath this boot floor panel, and then there's a front cavity. We'll do that one a bit later on. So rear cavity, we open up some grommet holes that are already in the chassis, and then particularly the left rear suffers, and it commonly suffers with a spot weld which is viewable from this hole here, coming into view just there. That is an 8mm spot weld, and normally they're cracked and they've got rust around them. Yours is perfect, no crack on that one, so that's really good news, and quite rare as well, so very good, gives a good idea of the condition of the car. Then the other time, there's in the bottom hole down here, there's also a line of spot welds which hold the cavity cover to the rear axle carrier panel, and normally these have got black crack lines in them as well, but yours again are very good. Just see if we can get in a bit closer. So this is a spot weld just here, there's one there, they're fine, there's no markings on them, and there's one more just over there, that's a spot weld, 8mm, and it's just holding that piece to that piece just down there, and they're fine, so that's really good. The rear internal cavity is all clear on your car, and that's really good news, because that is quite an expensive thing to do all the fixes inside the car, so we don't need to worry about that. We're going to now go inside the car and have a look at the other cavity inside the car. So rear seats removed, and we've taken off some redundant brackets that aren't needed on these models. Drilled a 20mm access hole, we painted it black so it won't corrode, and we'll put grommets in here. We'll give it a vacuum and dust down shortly. This is looking at 2 MIG welds in the front cavity. What I should explain is they're underneath the rear seat. This is the rear seat panel that slopes up, and there's a cavity in here where I can get my finger there, and that's some MIG welds that hold the threaded receivers for the front mounts. So they are quite hard to picture because we're going through a layer, but we'll try and focus. There's one MIG weld coming into view there in the center of the screen. It just looks like a slug basically, and that black marking on it, which looks a bit oily and waxy, is a crack likely through the corner of the MIG weld. And what happens is the wax that's in these cavities seems to attract itself to these cracks, and then the dirt sticks to the wax and highlights it in a darker color for us, which is quite handy. That MIG weld in the distance, I know it's not terribly clear. That one looks okay at the moment. So it looks to be one very slight early sign of a crack in that MIG weld. Then going over to the other side, there's also one here as well. So one MIG weld, not very well penetrated, because you can see there's a big gap down the side where the factory didn't weld it perfectly, and that sort of brown smudge line is a bit more thicker, but that's likely to be a crack. It's in the telltale location of these cracks, but super good underneath. Honestly, we're normally seeing lots of big cracks in here on a car that's got similar mileage to yours. Another little sign of a crack just at the bottom of the screen where my shadow is now. So I'd likely say that the front MIG welds would definitely benefit from being stop drilled, removed, and then re-welded. So that is a few hours work to take out more interior trims, take off the sound deadening pad in this area, cut open an access panel to then work on those areas, and then paint it and put it back together as we found it. But the good news is you don't need anything in the rear of the car, which is very good. So we're going to put the car on the lift, have a look underneath, and see if we can find anything underneath the car now. Right Rick, we've got the car in the air now, and we're having a look underneath. There is a hairline crack I can see next to the left rear subframe mount. It's on the rear axle carrier panel, which some people call the subframe panel, and it's just above this anti-roll bar mount in this area where this dry dirt is. We'd normally clean the dirt off, but the car looks like it's been like wax oiled or shot or something, because it's got black paint underneath the car, a little bit sticky, so we won't be able to clean that off for you to get a perfect picture. But there's an extremely small hairline crack just starting just at the very left of my finger now, and I can picture it a little bit better if I show you from another angle. I might need to illuminate another area. Bear with me a second. Right, just coming into view in the absolute centre of the screen now. A very tiny little scratch line. If you're looking on a clock face, it would be almost 11 o'clock, and that is minute, very, very tiny, early stages, and it is a hairline crack. So that one would need to stop drilling, welding, and in an ideal world, reinforcement plates. That's the sort of approach that we take to it. There's also, it is harder to see things because of this black paint, but I think we can see a spot weld on the very left of the panel where it's spot welded to the wheel arch panel. Seems to be an indent to suggest a spot weld might be broken. Somewhere about here it looks like a spot weld could be broken. Up there is one that commonly breaks, but we can't see that one at the moment. Very slight little corrosion line in the seam sealer on the other side, which suggests the panel might have moved very small amount, which is like what they all do, like a millimetre or even less than a millimetre. The right front mount looks quite good at the moment. That's without taking the subframe down, but from what we can see, which is extremely hard to picture because there's so many things in the way, what we can see is above the rubber bush, it seems to be good. There's no massive cracks coming out of that area. There's likely to be a spot weld broken probably if it was to be taken down, but that's just from our knowledge because we do so many of these, sort of one every week almost on a year in year out basis. So very good condition, just a small hairline crack next to this left rear mount. Not that dangerous at the moment. At least one spot weld up on that side. And likely to have something above the front right mount, although it's not a visual crack coming out of the mount at the moment. Whilst we're under it, just a couple more things just to make you aware of that we've just noticed whilst walking around. There's a heat shield missing from the exhaust plate here. The little nuts have snapped off the studs. The V-brace, which is a strengthening brace underneath the car, seems to have either corroded through or just badly split. I think it's actually corroded through because it's only thin metal. So that might be structurally weakened. There's a ABS sensor wire not clipped in or not routed correctly. It doesn't need to go through that system. That's quite close. It hasn't been touching the wheel, but look, it could touch the wheel quite easily. I think that was about it really. Nothing of huge concern. So yeah, all in all, very good condition for its mileage actually. That is one of the better ones we've seen, to be honest.